win together. It helps all of us grow and become more successful as a team. And so we're going to continue moving forward. And actually right now we want to recognize one of our gold sponsors. And in this segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about EV. You guys also received the buttons to let you know that, of course, dealers are all in for EV. And if you're not all in, well, you've got the next couple of days to get all in, right? Because it is coming. That EV technology is here. It's been here. And it's going to become more and more prevalent, whether we're talking about it, getting more comfortable with it, more knowledgeable in our understanding of it, and even applying it to our own life. You know, there's a lot of aspects from the EV technology standpoint that we're going to start to incorporate and see. We went to the movies the other day as a family, and right at the movie theater, they've got 7, electric charging stations that weren't there 2 years ago. And so just seeing that is becoming more and more prevalent. And I think really we're going to, continue to embrace it and take advantage of it. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to take this is IHS Market, and we're going to talk about dealers are now in the EV driver's seat. And for that, I'd like to welcome Ryan. Ryan, hey, there he is, ready to go. Ryan,
ready.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing great, thank you.
Good. What do I hit to advance here? Green?
Yes, sir.
All right. Hello. Hello, NADA. Look at us, maskless in Vegas. It's like we're breaking the law. Great to see everyone here. I have grown up going to NADA. I'm not sure. I'm thinking this is maybe my 30th convention, somewhere in there. And this is an exciting one. And you can definitely feel a turn of what's happening here. So I do think we are ready. We're poised. I think dealers are now in the EV driver's seat. We've learned a whole new language. We'll kind of review some of that terminology here. Can you guys see this okay? That's the boring one. There we go. I've got a couple workshops coming up I hope you guys can make. They're 10:30 tomorrow, 10:30 Saturday morning, really working on strategic revenues around EV infrastructure and also on-site power generation. And I'll tell you why this is such a passion play for me in a second, but that's 10:30 tomorrow and also Saturday. And then also really encourage you to track me down. I'm going to be between GM and Toyota in the West Hall at the solar booth, but love to meet you one-on-one and talk electricity. I've grown up in the car business. I was the SOB, son of boss, PhD, Papa has dealership. Loved it, and then in about 2007, 2008, Automotive News did a story on me because I was commuting to work on my bike. And they thought that was kind of weird to have a car guy commuting to work on a bike. Although it was an hour and a half each way, which in Colorado we're a bunch of tree-hugging green people, and that's what we did. But what I learned is there was this interesting tension back then that being a sustainable, green-thinking guy in the car business was kind of a unique deal. I took, after a couple years, a bit of a turn and got into sustainability, specifically for the auto industry, and learned a lot. Actually partnered with the past CEO of Chrysler and a longtime director for Whole Foods, and had some pretty interesting mentors. But getting into venture capital and sustainability back then was really about post-warranty car care and thinking about better products, less bad silicone-based wiper blades. Remember, different types of oils were coming out, Acopia, Bridgestone tire, so less bad green stuff for the car industry. Well, interestingly, about 6 years ago, we started to get a sniff that EVs were really coming. This wasn't this rumor, they're coming. How does this massive trillion-dollar industry pivot and get into that space and really build financial arguments around it? So what I'm excited about right now is this is about 15 years of my life happening now with this crescendo, and it's here. So I think we're ready. So who are all these new people at our convention? How are we getting to learn their terminology? We welcome them. I think it's great. I think one thing that's really interesting here is one of my mentors back in the day was Howard Behar, and he was the past president of Starbucks. And he said, Ryan, if you can ever get into the liquids business, if you can ever get into the fluids business, do it, because people consume it, they get addicted to it, and they want to do it again. So he was talking about oil and beer, and certainly for him it was coffee. Well, guess what? That's electricity for us. And the timing to really understand what electricity, we've talked so much about the supply equipment and the EV models coming out, but when you get in the weeds of the electricity, it starts to get very exciting. And you'll find that the cost of all of the equipment and the inventory is not as exciting as the cost of electricity. So we're really becoming our own fueling station, right? We're going to be fueling our employees' cars, our inventory, our customers' cars, the general public's cars. You're in the fluids business whether you know it or not. So now there's this whole new lingo and language. A lot of it's in the halls today, but we're starting to figure it out. So EVSE, EV supply equipment, we didn't know what that meant several months ago. Utility bills, that used to be some line item in our composite that just pay the bill. It's a fixed expense, just pay it, let it go. All of a sudden, it's starting to be topical. We've got that utility bill out and we're realizing, holy Toledo, look at how many different ways they're billing us. Transmission charges, distribution charges, peak demand charge, there's so many different ways. And what used to be maybe $2,000 a month or $1,500 a month became $6,000, now it's $8,000, now you're looking at $12,000. I work with dealerships all over the US, there's some $20,000 to $30,000 a month. They're paying electricity, and oh, by the way, this is before we're charging cars. So this is kind of the calm before the storm. So we got to get medieval about understanding what these utility bills really are, what's the story that they're telling us. We need smarter facilities. So if you think you've got a smart thermostat and your dealership is smart now, it's not smart enough. So I'll show you a couple best practices, good ideas, maybe some new terminology you haven't heard yet, but get your dealerships smarter. And then we'll get into a few key takeaways. This is dark, so it's hard for me to see it here, but here's a couple new companies, right? Big old handful of EV charging equipment companies. We didn't know what ChargePoint was a couple years ago. Wallbox, FSEC, Delta, these are all new brands that are here. There's new technologies. We didn't know what level 2 and DC fast chargers were. You look at all the different utility companies that are licking their chops as they're becoming the new Texaco, the new Shell. All of a sudden they're very friendly. And oh, by the way, some of them are willing to work with you on upgrading your transformers, upgrading the infrastructure. They'll pitch in some dough, not all of them, but some will, because they're pretty happy with car dealers. Look at what we're gonna do for them. We're gonna suck in a lot of electricity. And then on-site power generation. This 5-6 years ago, when I first brought solar into NADA, it was this novelty. You know, people would come by and say, what are you building solar powered cars? What are you doing here? Now it's not so much a novelty. Now we're talking about putting the roof to work for the store. It does not make sense. There's a couple states where it still doesn't pencil, but for about 48 states of us, it makes sense for on-site power generation. So we are evolving. Look at the new terms we're learning here. What's a tariff rate? What is our, what's the rate that our utility company has us on, and how do we impact that? What is TOU, time of use? So wait a minute, they're gonna charge me different rates depending on when I use that electricity. Yes. So think about this. For you GMC dealers out there, you got a Hummer, 200 kilowatt hour battery. By agreement with GM, they want that to leave with about 80 or 90% of a charge before it goes back to the customer. You've all agreed to that. So that customer, probably a pretty affluent customer, they're gonna drop it off that morning. Service could be, who knows, tire rotation, could be brake job, whatever it is. You're gonna be done with it after lunch. It's now 1 p.m. And you only have a few hours to charge up that great big 200 kilowatt hour battery. Well, a level 2 charger isn't gonna give you enough juice to get that thing back in their hands when they come off of work and they wanna pick that car up. So now you gotta use a DC truck. So now you gotta have a DC fast charger to fill that thing up. Well, that is a fire hose of electricity that's going into that battery at the time of use when that utility rate is at its highest that afternoon. So what are the technologies that are gonna help us mitigate those costs? You better figure that out. Otherwise, as we learned with a dealership actually here in Las Vegas, the per vehicle charge, one charge per day, when you add up peak demand charges, how that level raised the standard kilowatt hour charge for the month, and then the actual energy that goes in, it was $400 per vehicle charge. That's not a courtesy that the manufacturer needs to pass on to the dealer. That's actually on us to figure out what are the technologies that throttle that electricity below those thresholds, which I can help answer your questions later, and get that cost down to where it's a few bucks. And that is understanding your utility bill. So time of use is killer. I'll show you demand charges in a second, building efficiency in a second. Let's get into this. Big auto groups that I've worked with, well, for many years, but about just 6 months ago, these are smarty pants, big old auto groups, really didn't understand the difference between level 1, level 2, and DC fast chargers. And I was kind of stunned by that because this has been my life for a long time. I thought this was pretty common knowledge. It's not common. So when we look at these three, here's what's really working and resonating. A level 1 charger, think of a straw. This is electricity that's coming through just a little bit at a time. That's where you plug into a 110 outlet, and you need to have that car parked for a while to charge up that big battery over a long amount of time. Level 2, think of a garden hose, right? More electricity is flowing through, you're gonna charge up the battery a little sooner. Good news, it's usually slow enough to where it's not gonna trigger your peak demand charges, okay? When we get into a DC fast charger, you do wanna think about that as a fire hose. They are pumping in it's flying. It's usually coming in during those peak demand times, and the money of that energy is big time. So the convenience of having a DC charger is great. Please understand the cost of the DC charger is what we've been paying attention to. I gotta spend 30 grand on a charger? I'm telling you, that's irrelevant. It's the cost of electricity and managing around that we really, many of us have learned. Many of us need to learn more about it. So when you look at your utility bill, this is an example, but time of use, on peak, semi-peak, on peak. What are my summer peak demand charges, my winter peak demand charges? How does that impact the operations of my dealership? Think about the training that your lot guys need to have, right? If they're plugging your demo in to fast charger to make sure that sucker's good and juiced up and ready to go, how much is that convenience costing you versus charging it at home or parking it overnight with a level 2 charger? It's massive. So operationally, there's a lot of training for our staff. We got to watch our watch on when we're fueling up cars. We may have inventory again someday. So you have to have a process for this, but maybe just one EV at a time, it's a little easier to micromanage it. So look at your bill. I'm happy to help you understand this as well. Talk to your utility company, ask them, please walk through my bill. And I'll tell you, one great utility happens to be NV Energy here. There's only about 110, 120 franchise dealerships in Nevada. I find them to be pretty mature, pretty proactive in helping dealerships understand how to navigate around these charges. They did an interesting project for me last year where we took that Hummer example and we looked at it charging one Hummer per day, 365 days a year, and we looked at the different tariff rates, so the different rates, but also different times of day. It was 3 or 4 grand of savings just by knowing how to form your billing, how to structure your billing with the utility company. And I gotta say, they were pretty amiable, malleable to figure out what was best for the dealership, because they actually want dealerships using DC fast charging, right? They want us using the fire hose. That's where they're making the money. Well, we're only gonna do that if we have a financial argument around it. And we're gonna learn pretty quick. When I said that bill maybe 8, 10 grand now, all of a sudden you're charging cars, you're north of 20 grand. Wait, what happened? Please get to understand your bills. All right, so demand charges. I don't know where your stores are on this map, but they're everywhere. You can see they're obliterating California. And normally what happens in California is moving east. But demand charges are really there. Of course, utility companies they're in existence to make money. It's this organized monopoly, controlled monopoly. But what they're really trying to do with demand charges is shape our behaviors, right? They really want us thinking about geez, if I ran my dishwasher at night instead of at 2 in the afternoon, I'll save money. Well, that's better for grid resiliency too. So think about this now with this whole tsunami of fuel coming into our cars, and how do they form a grid that can take it? Well, they have to change behaviors, and peak demand charges are a pretty good way to do it because they're going to hit us in the wallet. I don't believe this needs to be expense or cost transfer to the operations of a dealership. I was just talking to Steve. I think the 20 groups need to have a page on this in our composite so we can understand this new, actually, profit center, when you play it right, but this new expense that we need to navigate around. So I don't know where your stores are, but that map's pretty crazy. I think peak demand charges used to be this rare, weird thing that was off in a different state, but hey, they're coming, and they're coming for real. Getting cozy with your utility company. Let's take this a little deeper. That fixed expense, we think about this, garage liability insurance, maybe it's your open lot insurance. You think about the things that you really can't change. That's how you've looked at a utility bill for decades. Just pay the bill, just pay the bill. That's a fixed expense. How do we move it into a variable expense? So when we have fluctuations in SAR, when we have fluctuations in our inventory, business comes and goes, how does that energy stay flexible as well? On-site power generation is a great way to do that. I'll get back to that in a sec. But also, understanding that you have choices to make. It's not a fixed expense. One of those is to take your DC fast charger and put it on its own meter. So think about this. If I've got that fire hose of a charger hooked up to the same rate plan as my dealership, that additional power that's coming through is subject to those same demand charges. When I put this in to its own meter, my utility company may work with me. If you're in Southern California, they have something called a demand charge holiday, a peak demand charge holiday. They'll take that DC fast charger and say, guess what? We'll put it on its own meter. We're going to vacate for 5 years your peak demand charges. No peak demand. Now, they do that in Hawaii. They're doing it in Southern California. Ask your utility if they'd be willing to do that. Separate that DC fast charger into its own entity and give me a break on peak demand charges. That's a great strategy. The other strategy here is to have a throttle. I'll talk to you in a sec about demand load controls, but you can have that screaming fast DC fast charger. Maybe it's 62 kilowatts or 150 kilowatts. But if your threshold for hitting that peak demand charge is 49 kilowatts, maybe between 1 and 7 p.m., well, then let's throttle that down to 49 kilowatts between 1 and 7 p.m. so I'm not subject to peak demand costs. And then maybe at 7 in the morning when you want to plug your demo in, you're back up to 62 or 150 kilowatts, and you can really charge it up. So there's something we don't see very often where there's financial support for a car dealership. There are subsidies, there's grants, there's incentives, and it's kind of a unique situation, but ask the question. I've worked with a lot of OEMs, and they've had a tough time wrapping their heads around this because, of course, they have kind of a one-size-fits-all national process on how to get your stores tooled up with the right chargers. But do you know you could have state, county, city, utility company, national incentives that will help you pay for your EV infrastructure. Could help upgrade your transformer, could help you pay for the installation, the underground wiring, the actual equipment. Ask those questions. I've got a program in the state of Colorado, April 6th. We're going to have the grant writers with the utility companies, with the franchise dealers, and say, what do you have for me? And we're seeing significant subsidy help offset that infrastructure. And I'll tell you, it's not cheap. When you go through the process of subsidies and grants, it also reveals where you can save money, like the tariff rates. It's not just going through the process to get the grant money. It's really getting your head wrapped around all of the components that are impacting the cost of charging a car. All right, and then let's take a second and talk about batteries and storage. It's not ready for prime time. It's kind of starting in California. There's subsidies in California, But the concept that will probably be ready for prime time around 2024, 2025 is this. You plug that Hummer in at 3, 4 in the afternoon. Rather than bringing the electricity in from the grid, you're going to have electricity stored in a battery that was probably charged up at 1 in the morning when electricity was its cheapest. And the brains, the software, will use that electricity to fuel up the car. So that's going to be, it's arbitrage, but that's really going to be a very powerful tool for us. But it's not ready yet. Batteries are way too expensive, capacity's too low, and they're actually huge. But commercial storage is coming, and that's going to help you with charging. All right, I told you we'd take a deeper look into this. Demand load controls. Just talking about your rooftop heaters and air conditioners, your rooftop HVAC, all right? Dealerships might have 4 or 5 up on the roof. What happens is your thermostat's going to say, geez, our showroom is getting hot, turn on the air conditioning. So all 4, boom, hit. That hits your peak charges and you're off and running. There goes your bill. If we can sequence those, think of this as fuel injection because I'm a car guy. Thermostat says, geez, we're getting hot in the showroom, hit the air conditioner. Now you've got the brains, the technology, demand load controls. It says, wait a minute, how is this going to impact my bill? So the choreography is to work with your billing and say, let's slow this down. Fire number 1, 3, 2, and then number 4, air conditioner. Let's slow it down. No perceivable difference to your showroom comfort. But by controlling that, it's the same thing I talked about earlier. It's going to throttle it down below the threshold. You're going to save a lot of money. That's having a smarter building. So learn what demand load controls are. Also, if you haven't taken a pass at this recently, it's not like you have to reinvent the wheel, but the Energy Star program that's on the NADA website has great ideas. Your facility needs to be more efficient because the costs are going up. Great best practices with that Energy Star program. There's also a neat little survey there that you can kind of walk around and play a game with. I think it was almost like a maze where you go through your dealership and find some money. Again, working with a lot of the OEMs, a lot of the manufacturers, environmental, social, and governance motivations are real. ESG, they want to hear what franchise dealers are doing to be better for the environment and how does that help them with their goals. If you're Toyota, you know this in spades. You're seeing what manufacturers like Hyundai are doing. Certainly, Porsche's taken a big stance on electric vehicles. So work with your regional managers, and often you're going to find support where when you do something green, you get a little something extra. If you don't know this, Toyota has just allowed solar to be eligible for their VSSE program, and they add vehicle allocation to the tune of 1 vehicle for every $8,400 you add in sustainability. All right, this is all money in the bank I'm talking about. So, you know, you can save money by switching to Geico. I mean, it's not very inspiring to save money. What I want to do is help you turn it into income. And that's what these workshops are about the next couple days, is how do you take energy efficiency, how do you take on-site power generation and convert that into new revenue streams for the dealer principal or for the dealership itself. And that's what Money in the Bank is all about. All right, my key takeaways for you is I believe electrification is an entrepreneur's paradise, right? If you're scared about lost income in the service department, my fixed ops, I'm not going to see them for oil changes, my parts. If you're nervous about all that, you know, maybe you're going to be sucked up with all the consolidation that's going on right now with buy-sells. But I'll tell you what, why is blue sky so high? Because the franchise system is here to stay, and the entrepreneurial dealers get it. They're finding and figuring out and studying, and I'm talking to some real rock stars in this space that are creative and clever, not just mitigating their risk, but like the utility companies, licking their chops and really finding some monetization out of these changes. I want to tell you, we've heard about Tesla and Rivian and direct sales, and I know we're just getting nauseous from that conversation, but there's 18,000 of us. We're organized, we're mature. It's 120 years of this organization. I think the franchise dealership has been dying for about 50 years now, so enough with that. But NADA is powerful, your state associations are powerful, you're also local, you're local. think of all of these nightmares of these national direct sales models and how they are not local. We're also nimble, entrepreneurial. I think the 20 groups are going to evolve in a very powerful way. We're poised for rapid growth in this space, so don't think we're just putting our toe in the swimming pool here. As you walk around today and tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, you're going to see we're swimming, and we're in it, and we're leading it. So that's why I say I think we're in the driver's seat right now. I don't think we need to be nervous. I don't think we have to peer around the corner and think, oh my God, EVs are coming. EVs are coming, let's bring it, and let's evolve with it, all right? Thank you very much, enjoy the show. Appreciate it.
All right, great job. Thank you. Appreciate the time. All right, guys, some great takeaways there.